Hello again, everybody. I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with a couple fantasy series to help you escape this fucking weird world we live in. These strange times. Personally, I find fantasy series some of the easiest things to escape into. I love so many genres of literature, of fiction, I guess. Horror is probably my favorite, but I have to say, I don't know if that one really lets me just literally forget about my life, you know what I mean? Not that they can't be gripping and intense and fun to read, but nothing really lets me let go of reality like a good fantasy series does. And I think maybe some people need that right now, if you can read right now. I know that that's sometimes hard to do in stressful situations, but I don't know. Maybe this will inspire you to pick one of these series up. The first one I want to talk about today, this is the beginning of a super long series called the Xanth series, I guess. This is by Piers, and the first one here is called A Spell for Chameleon. I've only read, I think, 4 or 5 of the Xanth novels, and I really like the world that Piers created in Xanth, but I know some of them, it's kind of like Terry Pratchett's Discworld, where some of the books are better than others, you know? And this first book here follows a man named Bink, and in this world, Xanth, everyone is supposed to eventually come into like their own magic, but Bink hasn't, and he doesn't know why, so he goes to the good magician to try to figure out like what the fuck's going on, because if you aren't magic, if you don't get your magic, you get exiled, which he doesn't want to happen, obviously. And the good magician says he has magic, but it's like crazy magic, and he needs to figure out how to use it. And so this is kind of like Bink's quest to find his magic, to be able to use his magic. And he meets a lot of weird friends and strange creatures and stuff like that. It's very much of those, like, one of those I'm going on an adventure books. Not all the Xanth novels follow Bink, but I believe the first 2 do. And then there are different plots and weird things that go on. But this is probably my favorite, and Bink is a nice character. Okay, next I have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is definitely one of those like probably YA fantasies where it involves a romance, so I know that's not for everybody, but this series I loved it so much. It was so good, I thought it was good. This follows a girl named Jude. She is a mortal living in fairyland, basically. And the fairies aren't nice there. They aren't like Tinkerbell. Well, I guess Tinkerbell isn't even very nice. But they aren't like small and cute and floaty. They're like tricky and mean, especially to mortals. So Jude grows up in that environment where she constantly has to fight and defend herself. You know, any wrong move she makes is kind of a sign of weakness. She has a hard time making any friends. She eventually she wants to be more powerful. She wants to be as powerful as she can be because she is immortal, and she wants to be as powerful as a fairy, and there's not necessarily any way for her to have fairy magic, but maybe if she gets involved with the politics of the fairies, she could be more powerful than she is right now. So this gets into a lot of politics. There's lots of scheming, and there's some romance, and it's got a really good hate to love thing going on, which I really like if that's done properly. And I really like the series. The last book finished up a little too quick for me. It was like, the huge problem was just solved too easily, but I really liked it still. So this was a good absorbing fantasy series. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Admittedly, I've only read this first book. It's a big floppy one. Mostly because there are 2 books out, the first and the second, and the third one has kind of like a George R.R. Martin thing going on where, is it gonna be soon? No, probably not. Is he working on it, or is he playing D&D every night? I don't know, but hopefully we'll get a third book soon. I get it. Like, I can't think of many things that have to be harder than creating a whole fucking world in your head and then putting that down on paper in a way that makes sense and is good. So this is about a man named Kvothe. He is an innkeeper, but he has a very interesting history. And this goes into his history. I think part of the most interesting parts of the way that this book is written is that Kvothe is telling his story to like a, I don't know, medieval journalist. What would that be? A chronicler, a bard maybe? I can't really remember. But he's like, listen, I'll tell you this story in 3 days. So this is like the first day of his story, and it's not just one day of his past, obviously. It's a huge chunk of his past, basically him growing up. And that's where this one leaves. Like I said, I haven't read the second one yet, but it's just as massive. Zach has read it though, and he really likes the series. He always gets after me for not reading the second one, but it's like, I feel like if I do that, then I'm gonna have to read the first and the second one over when the third one comes out, instead of just reading the first one again and then reading the second one and then reading, I don't know. I have problems. This is good though. It's for its size, it's really quick to get through. Like the writing is just very readable, which is nice. Okay, next I have Abarat by Clive Barker. This is about a young girl named Candy Quackenbush, and she kind of gets sucked into this magical world called Abarat. And it's just such a super weird world. It's just like so fun and strange, and it's really a world unlike any other fantasy world I've ever heard of. And it's written by Clive Barker. He does a lot of horror that kind of melds into like dark fantasy, you know. This one is a little more lighthearted. I think this one is technically like young adult, but it's really good. I think the first time I ever found this, it was in like the teen section in a library, so I'm pretty sure that this is young adult, but it's a little more lighthearted. It's fun to read, it's interesting, it's absorbing, it's a book that you get into like right away, because there's no pussyfooting in the beginning. It just gets right into it, which I like, and I think it's important to find books like that right now. Okay, next is a series I've talked about all the fucking time, but I cannot make a list like this and not include Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series. The first book is called The Way of Kings. This is just part 1 of the first book, in this edition at least. You can also get these big floppy massive paperbacks, or they come in even more massive hardcovers. But I really like the designs on these UK editions, so I've bought those. So this plot is so expansive, it's really hard to give a synopsis that isn't 30 minutes long. But very basically, we're following 3 characters. There is Dalinar Kholin, and he is the uncle to the king. His brother was the king, and his brother was assassinated in the not so distant past, which has ignited this war against these people called the Parshendi. They are not exactly human. It's like a human with this carapace on it. I don't know, it's so hard to explain. It's so crazy. They have different forms that they morph into. The way they speak is more like a melody. It's so crazy. This book is so crazy. So, Dalinar. And then we also have a young woman named Shallan, and she is trying to become the student of this woman named Yasna Kholin, which is actually Dalinar's niece. Shallan really needs to do this. She needs, I'm not gonna, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's very important that she gets this tutorship, this tutelage. It's very important for her family. And then the third person we're following is a man named Kaladin, and he is a slave who was a soldier fighting in this war against the Parshendi. He was betrayed by his captain and all this shit. And so like, those are the people we're following. It's so expansive. The world building is great. It's so easy to visualize where people are and what's happening, even though there are quite a few characters that we bounce around from. The writing, it's easy to read. Right away when I picked this up, I just needed to know what was going to happen next. So definitely a good world to get lost in. I also have another YA series here. This is Eragon by Christopher Paolini. This is the first book in a 4-book series. The next 3 books are quite a bit chunkier than this one here. This is about a boy named Eragon who finds a dragon egg, and the dragon egg hatches for him and he becomes bonded to this dragon. Dragons hadn't been seen anywhere in years and years and years. There is like an evil king who has 1 dragon and a bunch of dragon eggs, and it's like he's been trying to find the right people to bond. Like, because an egg doesn't just hatch for anybody, it has to be a person that the tiny little dragon inside knows is their person, I guess. And this gets pretty crazy. There's a lot of, like, I don't know, it's very much a book where the little people are trying to overthrow this big bad guy. I know this book gets some grief about maybe borrowing some ideas from other well-known fantasy series. I mean, the main character's name is Eragon, but I still really loved this series. I've reread it as an adult and still like it. Obviously, you know, I can see where maybe there are some plot holes and stuff reading it now as an adult, but I really think that this is just such an easy series to read. It's easy to care about these characters and to care about their plight. And I really love books with dragons, and I think that this is a fun one even for adults. Quite easy to read as an adult. So yeah, that's Eragon. I keep wanting to say Aragorn, if that tells you anything about anything. The last one here is The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. There is some controversy with this author, and rightly so, because there's been allegations of like sexual abuse from her daughter. And well, I've had this book for longer than I've known about that, first of all. And also I really, at least my stance on stuff like this is sometimes we can separate the artist from their art as long as their art isn't also gross and shitty. Like, I'm sorry, that's why I won't read Lovecraft. Is, I mean, you can say that's just of his time, but that's also in his work, and I just don't want to read racist crap. So, this doesn't have any mothers and fathers abusing their children in this book. So, this is a tale about King Arthur and how he came to be. This is a big book. It's hard to hold up for long periods of time. This is a big book, and it's told mostly from the perspective of Arthur's sister Morgane, and I don't know what else to tell you guys about this. It's just really, it goes through so much. I mean, it begins even before Arthur is born, and how the world was kind of manipulated into him being born even. There's a lot of like magical manipulation to make certain things happen a certain way, and it goes all the way into Arthur's kinghood and what goes on there. I mean, Guinevere's in it, Lancelot's in it. It's really a good book. Lots of like scheming and weird magic to make certain things happen and stuff like that. It's one that it's been a while since I've read it, and I really want to read it again. And maybe I'll do that during this quarantine. That's all I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope maybe one of these will be interesting enough for you to pick up. I really hope that everyone's doing well though, and that you're staying safe and staying healthy, and having a good time if you're able to self-isolate. And if you're not, if you're an essential worker, you fucking rock. There are so many essential workers that aren't getting the, I'm not saying that anybody's more important than anybody else, but like, people talk a lot about grocery store employees and health workers, and they're so important, but they are not the only essential workers out there. There's so many people that are helping keep the world going right now. They're keeping the world moving, and you all are fucking fantastic. Equally fantastic. And you're risking your lives, and thank you. I don't have to do that, luckily, but my husband does. So he is an electrician in a hospital, so he's not exactly on the front lines, but he's like right behind the people on the front lines. So just be safe, and you guys are the best, and read a good book. Bye!